did not stop. When the United States Commerce Department issued annual import licenses to Taiwan Semiconductor, Samsung, and the South Korean memory maker to govern chip-making equipment flowing into their Chinese fabrication facilities in 2026. The coverage framed it as a tightening, a new administrative layer, replacing the older validated end-user framework, replacing a standing pre-clearance with a periodic review. Read the document for what it plainly authorizes, and that framing holds. Read it again for what it declines to say, and the tightening begins to look like something else. A gate, documented and orderly, whose setting the document most carefully declines to publish. We will read this licensing structure twice, first for what it establishes, then for the line of the record it conspicuously leaves blank. The 2026 annual licenses authorize continued shipment of chip-making equipment from United States origin suppliers, and from suppliers whose technology has United States content, to the named company's facilities on Chinese soil. The authorization runs on an annual renewal cycle, rather than a transaction-by-transaction basis. That is what the instrument plainly records: a class of recipients, a class of facilities, a duration. The Taiwanese foundry, Samsung, and the South Korean memory maker are the same entities that held validated end-user status under the prior framework. The document does not expand the circle of authorized operators. It does not contract it. The names that were cleared before are the names that are cleared now, under a new administrative label. The validated end-user framework, which had granted a standing pre-clearance to certain trusted foreign operators, is retired as the operative instrument. In its place, the annual license introduces a periodic review moment. Each year, the Commerce Department must affirmatively renew the grant. That is a genuine administrative change. It creates a scheduled point of decision that the prior status did not. The holder of a validated end-user designation could ship under that clearance indefinitely, until someone chose to revoke it. The holder of an annual license must return to the desk and collect it again. The door may open the same way. Someone is now standing at the desk when the holder comes back. The document does not say what they are looking for when that happens. The licenses apply to the company's own facilities on Chinese soil, meaning equipment destined for fabs those companies own and operate, not for transfer to Chinese third-party chip makers. The instrument records a formal administrative relationship. The licensee accepts the conditions attached to the annual grant, and the grantor retains the procedural right to set those conditions at each renewal. That is the first reading, complete and plain. The document authorizes continuity and establishes the mechanism of periodic review. The record shows both of those things without ambiguity. The second reading begins with a single fact the document does not contain. The licenses authorize equipment shipments, but do not publicly specify which equipment nodes or process generations fall within their scope. A licensing instrument that names a company and a facility, but declines to name a technology ceiling, leaves the operative limit somewhere outside the public record. The document establishes oversight without establishing, for the reader, what is being overseen at what level of sophistication. That gap is not incidental. The question every analyst and every observer brought to this licensing action was whether the permitted equipment crosses into leading-edge process territory, and the public text declines to answer it. The framework replaces validated end-user status, but does not, in its public form, enumerate the conditions under which annual renewal would be denied. A renewal mechanism whose refusal criteria are unwritten is a mechanism whose deterrent force is also unwritten. The document records the existence of periodic review. It does not record what triggers a negative outcome of that review. The threat of non-renewal is present in the architecture of the instrument. Its operative teeth are not described in the text. The Commerce Department has reserved the right to say no at each renewal cycle, and the document does not say what yes and no are each contingent upon. The validated end-user framework carried with it a known set of compliance obligations: site visits, record-keeping requirements, specific end-use commitments. The terms that accompanied that designation were documented. The annual license, as publicly described, asserts that those obligations are replaced or superseded. The replacement terms are not laid out in the accessible record. The document says the old framework is gone. It does not say, in equivalent specificity, what the new framework requires the recipient to demonstrate. That is a precise and consequential omission. The prior instrument was legible, and the new instrument, at the level of its public description, is not. The record has further limits worth naming, and they compound the silence. The public record does not include the full text of the conditions attached to each company's specific grant. Those terms may be more restrictive or more permissive than the administrative description suggests, and the accessible record cannot resolve that. The document does not say whether the equipment categories authorized under the annual license are identical to those previously covered by validated end-user status, narrower, or expanded at specific nodes. Independent technical analysis of what was shipping under the prior framework is thin and not systematically public, which means the baseline against which to measure any change is itself incomplete. An absent condition in the public description of a license is not evidence that the condition does not exist in the full instrument. It is evidence only that it is not in the portion of the record we can read. That distinction matters for any close reading. Absence in the text is not absence in the world. The annual renewal cycle adds one more layer to this. The document in its 2026 form is, by design, provisional. What it establishes now, it reserves the right to revise. A close reading of the 2026 text does not foreclose a materially different text at the next renewal. What the record settles is narrower than what the record implies. It settles that the shipments are authorized under a new administrative label for another year. It does not settle whether the substantive boundary moved. Any reading that claims otherwise is reading past the edge of the text. The decisive silence sits at the center of all of this. The document records a transition from one control instrument to another without recording, in comparable detail, the substantive conditions attached to the new instrument. It establishes that a gate exists and that it will be reviewed annually. It does not establish, in the public text, where the gate is set, which generation of equipment, which process node, which end-use verification standard separates what is licensed from what is not. Those specifics are exactly what would answer the question the headlines raised. Those specifics are exactly what the document leaves out. Read plainly, this document is an authorization to continue. Read against its silences, it is an authorization that declines to publish its own limits, which means the limits, whatever they are, exist in a part of the record that is not open. The transition from validated end-user status to annual licensing is a real administrative change. It creates a renewal moment, a scheduled point of decision that the prior framework did not. Whether that moment will be used to move the line or simply to confirm its current position with fresh paperwork, the document in its 2026 form does not say. The record is orderly, the gate is documented, and the question the document raises, where exactly the gate is set, is the one the document most carefully leaves unanswered. The next instrument worth reading closely is whatever the Commerce Department publishes when the first of these annual licenses comes up for renewal. Not the grant itself, but the conditions document, if it surfaces, because that is where the stated boundary and the operational boundary will either converge or diverge, and the gap between them will be the next document's silence. If you want to read the next document when it lands, subscribe, and we will be here when the text arrives.